Unique people leading unique lives shape and inform Iowa City. This community is enhanced by these women and men who live in our midst, working, teaching, creating. Welcome to a series of conversations with people who have stories to tell. Join my guests and me, Ellen Buchanan, in a series of interviews called One of a Kind. Dr. William E. Scott, the well-known pediatric ophthalmologist, was born and raised in Iowa City. In 1998, in a national poll, Dr. Scott was voted as one of the best doctors in his specialty. After graduating from City High in 1955, he enrolled at the University of Iowa with an athletic and academic Niall Kinnick Scholarship. Bill, as he's fondly called, played basketball and football his freshman year. His sophomore year, he dropped basketball and traveled with the football team to the Rose Bowl. Graduating from the university in 1959, he entered medical school at Iowa, receiving his MD in '64. After an internship at Wayne State in Detroit, where he was voted the best intern in the hospital, Bill was drafted into the Navy, serving 2 years. He returned to Iowa for a residency in ophthalmology. He's had 2 fellowships, Smith-Kettlewell Institute of Visual Sciences in San Francisco and the Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C. In 1971, he joined the medical faculty at Iowa. Besides seeing patients, teaching, lecturing here and abroad, doing research and publishing, Bill served on numerous university committees, like the Board of Control for Athletics, the Faculty Senate, the Committee for Committees, and many others. His honors and awards are numerous. I mention just a few. The American Academy of Ophthalmology Distinguished Service Award in 1982. The American Academy of Ophthalmology Honor Award in '92. And this June, in 2002, the Iowa Eye Association annual meeting will honor him. An endowment for the William E. Scott Chair for Pediatric Ophthalmology was recently announced. And Bill will retire in July of this year. Working with the Lions Club, he was instrumental in starting a visual screening program for children in the state. One of his passions, besides his family and work, is his love of the outdoors. He's an avid waterfowl and trout fisherman. His involvement in Ducks Unlimited has been extensive and rewarding. Bill and his wife, Winnie, raised 2 sons in Iowa City, Christopher and Douglas. They have 2 grandsons and 2 granddaughters. Welcome to One of a Kind, Bill.
Thank you.
I know your story begins in June of 1937 in Iowa City. Tell me a bit about your parents and kind of their influence on you.
Well, we first lived on Iowa Avenue on the 900 block. And we lived there for 13 years. And then we moved all of 2 houses down the street. And I lived there until I got married in 1960. Mm-hmm. My parents, my father in the early years was in the defense section during the war. And he spent a lot of time in Burlington, Iowa, where my mother was raised. My father was raised close by there in New London, in the ordnance plant, building ammunitions. And therefore, a lot of the early experiences I remember was with my mom when the kids were left at home, and the influence that she had in our lives. And my mom was a school teacher, mm-hmm. so education was very important to her. And mm-hmm. I was a typical young boy, not very well directed probably when I was in the grade schools, because I was just around to have a lot of fun.
Now this was at Longfellow School,
at Longfellow,
correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Went to Longfellow and then graduated from there, then moved on to, well, it's no longer there. It was the only junior high in Iowa City, and then it was Central Junior High, and then mm-hmm. they tore it down for the Mercy Complex. But that was very local because Longfellow was very close to Iowa Avenue, and Central Junior High was even closer.
Well, when did you get kind of hooked into studying? I mean, you played for at City High, you played both basketball and football, correct?
And ran track.
And ran track.
Yeah, I was out for all sports all the time except in the summers. I never played the baseball because usually I went and had a job or two in the summertime.
Was your father a big sports fan?
No, not at all. My father was a very hard-working person, but didn't have a lot of hobbies. The only thing he really enjoyed doing was playing pool, and he loved to play pool. And so people from Iowa City years ago that used to play pool all knew my father because he used to love to go play pool.
Where did he play pool in Iowa City?
Well, they had a place down in Iowa City called the Smoke Shop.
Huh.
And that was about where the airliner is today. And it was upstairs there because I remember when I was an undergraduate and in high school, I used to go up there and he used to manage it in the evenings just so he could play pool. And he was a salesperson and worked for the old Sidwell Ice Cream Company, and then he worked for Sanitary Farm Dairies and retired from there. My mom taught school when she was younger, but then stayed at home. She was a stay-at-home mom to raise the 3 kids. I have 2 sisters and myself. And then she went back to work after we all got into college, and she worked for ACT Westinghouse at that time until she retired.
Well, you were all-state in high school, and was there any doubt you were a hometown boy, success on the basketball court and the football field, that you were going to go to Iowa? Was there any doubt in your mind that you were going to go to Iowa?
Well, it was, I had thought about going away to school. Back then, there wasn't the recruiting processes that there are today. I competed for the Niall Kinnick Scholarship, and that was sort of your academic record and your sports record. But it was mainly a competition type of thing through your entrance exams. And so I took those exams and competed for the Niall Kinnick Scholarship. And then when I got it, at that point in time, no one had ever turned down a Niall Kinnick, and I wasn't about to do that. So I was very happy to go to Iowa. We had limited resources, so to have a scholarship to college, and I actually stayed at home all the way through college. And that was a great advantage because I was in a fraternity, but when I needed to study, I could get away to home to study. And so that was a win-win deal as far as I'm concerned.
And study you must, because you got a scholarship to medical school.
Well, I started off in medical school without any type of scholarship, but after my first year, I'd done well enough to have earned a tuition scholarship, which was a great deal of help, because that allowed me to stay at home and get through the first year. Then after my first year of medical school, Winnie and I got married in 1960, and then she went to work, and I did a teaching fellowship in medical school so that we could live in Hawkeye apartments and survive.
Like so many others.
Like so many others.
Now, I said in my introduction, you started off at Iowa both playing basketball and football, but it was just too much, right?
Well, my great love of sports, I guess the sport that I was the most proud of was probably track, because when I started in high school, I was probably the slowest, biggest guy in the school, but I had a great track coach by the name of Chick Forwald, and they've named some relays after him at City High now, the Forwald relays. Really wanted to work me, and I ended up running on the sprint relay teams and would run the open 100 and 200 and ran at Drake and at State, and so I was very proud of that accomplishment because I started very, very slow and ended up being a sprinter by the time I graduated from high school.
What a wonderful track coach.
Well, it was. I mean, it was just, he was very motivating. And then basketball, I probably had the most success in basketball because we went to the state basketball tournament my senior year and got beat by Ames in the final, but had a very good season and a very good tournament. And I thought I was going to go to college and play basketball. And when I enrolled at the university with an Niall Kinnick Scholarship, the football program offered to help me with my books if I would go out for football. I thought, geez, that was a good deal. So I didn't realize what kind of commitment that was at the time. And it wasn't the commitment that there is today. You know, back then the sports were very much seasonal, and then you could do other things. Now, of course, when you make a commitment, it's 365 days a year, the types of commitments these young people make. But anyway, so I played both in my first year, and then the second year, it became more difficult because I had made the traveling team as a sophomore and got to go to the Rose Bowl. By the time we got back, I figured it was time to concentrate on trying to get into medicine, because at that time I decided I wanted to go to med school, and I needed to have a good grade point to do that.
So, but you went to one more Rose Bowl.
Oh yes, and we got to go again when I was a senior.
Oh my!
So that was a wonder. I mean, it was a great lifetime experience, and that I'd have to classify that as one of my great lifetime experiences, is to have that opportunity. And you know, so much of life, I think, is being in the right place at the right time, and you have to have the chemistries to go the right way. But that was just such a fortunate thing, because it was something I'll never forget.
Weren't you thrilled to have your son Douglas play for Iowa?
Well, yes, I was. I thought that Doug had a lot of opportunities in college. He was recruited by 5 or 6 major programs, and I thought that, you know, I thought he could go to any one of those places. Now, the problem was it had to be close enough that we could get to the games.
Sure.
But anyway, as it turned out, I think it was very good that he went to Iowa, because when he played in the Shrine game his senior year, he tore his knee up. And he started to college on crutches, and that would have been pretty tough at UCLA or Arizona. And so he could rehab here, and we had a lot of good people to help him rehab, and so we were very happy that that's how it turned out. Well,
you obviously did study hard in college, and you're in medical school, and you met Winnie before you start. Let's talk about how you met. There must be a story.
Oh, there is a story.
There is a story.
Sure.
Behind every great man, there's usually a great woman.
Well, that's for sure. I met Winnie on a blind date. She was being recruited, as high school girls are, into various sororities, and she was invited down to a local sorority that her sister was a member of. And I happened to be in a fraternity that her now brother-in-law, and they've gotten married. That's Sally and Jim Hubbard. And so he lined me up with Winnie on a blind date when she was invited down to the sorority house as a high school senior. So I started to date her when she was in high school. And then we dated several times more as she came to other sororities. And then when she enrolled at the university in 1956 that she came in, we started dating, and then went through the process then. You know, you get chained and pinned, and
that's right,
eventually engaged and so forth. I imagine they still do it today, but we went through those processes.
Those rituals.
Rituals, right, exactly. And so we dated all the way through college. And then I went to medical school. She finished college, and then we got married in 1960.
And you said she taught, too.
Yeah, she taught at Roosevelt, and then she taught when I went away on internship. And then after that, I got drafted right at the end of my internship, and Christopher was going to be born, our oldest son. And actually, I went to see when Christopher was born. You know, people say, how can they draft a person that's 6'8", and how can they send you to see when your wife's going to have her first baby? But it all happened.
That all happened.
That's right.
So how long till you saw Christopher? How long were you gone?
Another one of those, being in the right spot at the right time. I was assigned, when I was drafted into the Navy, they said, a guy called me up on the phone and said, well, you're either going with the Marines to Vietnam, or you're going to be on a destroyer. Now, I'd never been at sea, ever, in my whole life. And so I was waiting for my assignment. And they finally called up and said that I was going to be assigned as a division medical officer on a destroyer squadron, which meant I was the medical doctor for 4 ships. Of course, you can only ride on one of them, but I had the responsibility of the crews of 4 ships. So they assigned me to Newport, Rhode Island. And so I went out there, and they said, well, we don't know if we're going to deploy you to Vietnam or not. So I called Winnie up, and Winnie, being about 7 months pregnant, drove out there with my sister. We got a place and moved in. The first morning we moved in, they called and said, you're leaving on Monday for a 7 to 8 month deployment to Vietnam from Newport, Rhode Island. And so I sent Winnie home and with my sister, and I went to sea. But the first night at sea, we had a collision. 2 of the ships ran into each other. So we had to pull into to Cuba, get repairs. Anyway, we ended up in San Diego. Winnie called and said, well, if I'd have the baby, could you come home? I said, Winnie, you're not due for 2 weeks. She had the baby that night.
Oh.
So I flew home and got to see Christopher within 24 hours after he was born, and got to spend a week at home before I went back to San Diego, and then we went on the rest of our cruise, which was a around-the-world cruise. We actually went around the world, which is another unique thing because very, very few people can be in the Navy for years
And never go.
and never go around the world.
But you never did go to Vietnam?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
you were?
Eventually, I came back and joined the ship in San Diego. We went across the Pacific. We stayed over there 4 or 5 months. During that time, we went to the Philippines, to Hong Kong, to Japan. And then they decided to bring the ships, all 8 of them, back across the Indian Ocean, up through the Suez Canal. On the way over, we went through the Panama. And then we came back through the Suez Canal, back through the Mediterranean, back to Newport. So, and that took 7 months. So I had a lot of good cruising, cruise ship before I ever got out of the Navy.
You have traveled, Bill
Yeah, that
Scott.
was, for a guy growing up in Iowa City, that was quite an experience.
That was an experience.
It really was.
So you're back from the Navy then, the 2 years. You moved back to Iowa for an ophthalmology residency.
Ophthalmology residency.
And for the layperson, your concentration has always been pediatric ophthalmology. And is there another concentration within pediatric ophthalmology?
Yes, back when I actually came back and finished my residency, I was thinking of either going into private practice and doing general ophthalmology or possibly subspecializing into a field called strabismus, and that's the other thing that you're referring to within pediatric ophthalmology. And really, there wasn't any pediatric ophthalmology at that time. It wasn't a defined subspecialty. It was just an interest in strabismus. So I decided this is what I wanted to do, and at that time, the chairman, Fred Blody, said, well, would you be interested in coming back to Iowa after you've taken your fellowship? And I said, well, geez, yeah, I like Iowa City, and I think it'd be fun to go into academic medicine. So being invited, I went off and took my fellowship at the places that you mentioned in San Francisco and Washington, and then came back and joined the faculty. But then after being on the faculty, there was about 15 people that got together in Chicago to found the subspecialty of pediatric ophthalmology. So there were 15 people that helped found this.
And you're one of the 15?
Yes, I was one of the group that sat together and drew up the guidelines for the Association for Pediatric Ophthalmology and Strabismus. That's the name of the subspecialty.
Strabismus, for the layperson?
That's misalignment of the eyes. The kid with a crossed eye, or the eyes that wander out, or the eyes that wander up or down. Misalignment of the 2 visual axes is what any disorder of that is called strabismus.
So how is it now? How many people in this specialty? Is it just grown?
Right now, I'd say there's 600, and that was
15.
formed in 1974. And so it's grown to probably about 600. There's probably been 30 new pediatric ophthalmologists being trained each year.
Well, when I read your resume, Bill, I thought, when did this man sleep? I mean, you've published, you've done research, and you've all the time seen patients and teaching. Is there 1 or 2 research projects or books or area that you just loved so much or are the most pleased about, or is it just been a continuum of what you've loved to do?
Yeah, I think, I've been a type of person that's really enjoyed working with people. There are people who like to invent and discover and work onto themselves, but I've been very, very fortunate to have worked with lots of good people. And working and collaborating with them, this is how I was able to do all the things that I've done. If I had to sit down and do all the bench research, all the chart reviews, all the everything for everything that I've done, I wouldn't have been able to accomplish much. But I've had an awfully lot of good people in residents and fellows and technicians that I've worked with over the years, other colleagues that I've been able to collaborate with, and therefore become more productive that way and working together, because I've always felt that if one person can accomplish quite a bit, a group of people working together can accomplish even more. And this has been, I think, what I've really enjoyed doing the most is the collaboration I've done with so many other good people that have had very, very good ideas and bright minds, and they may have come along and worked in it for a while, then they went off and did something else. But this has been the fun of the teaching research aspect of it, because most all my research has been in clinical activities.
And teaching, you've been honored, I know, by your residents, that teaching has been a real high point in your career, has it not?
Well, yes, because that's the thing that I think stimulated me the most as a youngster. As I said, and we talked about before, the first 6 years of my life, in grades 1 through 6, were just having fun going to school. Until finally I had a teacher in 6th grade sit down and said, you're really wasting your life, because you could produce so much more if you really worked.
Your sixth grade teacher said that?
Yep.
Do you remember your 6th grade teacher's name?
Miss Reynolds, yeah.
Miss Reynolds.
Yeah.
Bless her heart.
I don't know what's happened to her.
Bless her heart.
I know. That's right. Bless her heart. But, I've had so many people in my life that have been so influential to me that have been educators. I mean, we in this country give education a lot of talk, but we don't give it the type of support it needs. I mean, and the people, and you talk to many, many people that have been successful in life, and, what do they owe that to? They owe it to their education and hard work, a lot of hard work. But without people that have devoted and given up so much, so it's kind of, to me, been a payback that I've enjoyed so much, because these people certainly did an awful lot for me, and hopefully I've been able to do something in return for other people that I've tried to influence. But anyway, I decided in a junior high to become a student, and then I think I stayed pretty much on track of a student back all the way through, and that's what helped me, because through education is where I've been able to get to today, because I really didn't have a job waiting for me, or I didn't have a business, or I didn't have a farm. And I don't regret that, because, but through education, the whole world opens up to you. And I still think that's kind of true today in this country, and I just want to see more support to education.
Amen. Amen.
And I don't want people to talk about it. I want people to do something about it. Because I've heard people talk about it.
No, I think it's wonderful that that teaching was so important. But now this has to do with you seeing patients. I had to kind of smile when I think you are 6 foot what, 6?
Well, they used to call me 6'8".
6'8".
But I'm probably about 6'7".
All right,
I'm a little over 6'6".
And here you walk into a room with a little child who's got an eye problem. I mean, how isn't the child a little intimidated by?
Oh, sure, just like people.
Yeah.
Because of your size, I think you intimidate a lot of people. And then if you speak with a deep voice,
which you have,
and then you have a tendency to get excited, as I do, then you intimidate the living tar out of people. And I guess if people are intimidated by me, it's because they don't know me. And once the child gets to know me, then we get along fine. I've always learned never to push myself onto young children, because your size does intimidate.
Sure.
So I usually sit back and let them come, and they do. And I mean, it's very interesting today. I have patients that I've taken care of for years that they're sending me their graduation announcements now, and some of these kids were some of the toughest kids as far as trying to get along with, but it's really worked out well over the years of letting them to get to know one another and not really trying to push the issue with the young child.
And you're correcting something that's so important.
It becomes very important to them later in life.
Yes.
I think as a child, they don't mind as much, because children are so adaptable.
Sure.
They adapt to whatever they have. But I think it makes a lot of difference to the family, and certainly makes a difference to them as they grow up.
Well, congratulations on the endowed chair in your
thank
name
you.
for pediatric education. That's just wonderful. And it's an anonymous gift, correct?
This is an anonymous gift, and the theme of the chair is a singleness of theme. I like uncomplicated things. And it's a chair for education in pediatric ophthalmology. And so this gift has been given very specifically to support educational activities, to try to maintain the flavor of good education in pediatric ophthalmology at the University of Iowa. This is a hard theme for many administrators to accept, because they're used to endowments being used for everything that they wanted to use them for. But this family was very specific, and this is the reason this family decided to give it, because they're people who are doing something about education, and they decided to put this money into an educational effort to maintain the educational efforts in pediatric ophthalmology.
That is just wonderful. I want to move on to, we mentioned Winnie, how you met Winnie, and your two sons, Christopher and Douglas. Where are they and what are they about? What are they doing?
Well, Christopher decided he wanted to go into medicine. So he, after going to undergraduate at Brown, he came back to the University of Iowa and finished his education and got his MD. And then he went to the University of Wisconsin to do an orthopedic residency. And now he's practicing in Mason City, Iowa, with a group of orthopedic surgeons and doing quite well and enjoying it a lot.
Good.
And Douglas, he went to work for a company called the Gaylord, which the CEO was Marvin Pomerantz, who's been very generous here at the university. And he went to work there, I think, around 9 years ago, and has worked into a sales managing position with Gaylord. Now, Gaylord just been recently sold, but they're quite anxious to keep Douglas working there for them. So, and he's very happy doing what he's doing.
And the father of two children, too.
Yep, he's got two girls, and Christopher's got two boys. Yeah.
Now, besides all these things we've talked about, your work and your family, you have another love, which is the outdoors, and a hunter and a fisherman. Now, they always say a hunter always has one great dog. Have you had one great dog? Or have you had just a string of great dogs?
Well, the dog is as great as the trainer.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And way back when, I had my dogs fairly well trained. Lately, I'm embarrassed to say my dogs are better dogs than I've been a trainer.
Okay.
And thank the good Lord for their breeding, because they've been able to do a lot of things on their own.
What kind of breed are you partial to?
I've been very partial to black labs.
Okay.
And I've had a series of black labs over the years. And I always keep two dogs, an old one and a young one. So if the old one gets tired and can't go, the young one keeps bugging me so that I keep going.
Yeah, well, I got you. And are these indoor dogs? Or
no,
outdoor?
they're basically outdoor dogs. We have a kennel at home here in Iowa City. Now, when we go up to our north house, we call it, which is up in northeast Iowa, they come in and sleep at night. They'd like to be indoor dogs.
Yeah, but you have to
not
be
not all the time, no.
Not all the time. Tell me your involvement with, and for people maybe who might not know about Ducks Unlimited. You've have done a lot of work with Ducks Unlimited.
Yeah, Ducks Unlimited is an organization that really has a singleness of purpose, and what they try to do is restore and maintain wetlands throughout North America, and they've expanded now internationally. But they stress their work mainly in Canada, United States, and now moving some into Mexico. And so the reason I like the organization is because I believe in restoration and maintenance of wetlands, because we've had so many wetlands in this country and we've destroyed them. We had 4 million acres of wetlands in 1900 in Iowa. We got down to 2,000 acres. And that was in the mid-'80s.
Is that turning back? I mean, are we getting some back?
We're going backwards now. Now we're back up to probably 6,000 or 7,000 acres in the state. And every year that keeps expanding because more and more people have become conscious of this, and we have the funds in which to be able to do it. But it has a singleness of purpose. It hasn't, and the other nice thing about it is, of every dollar that's given, more than 80%, and they've always maintained this ratio, goes into the resource. So there's not the overhead, and if you look at a lot of organizations, you give them $1 and maybe a quarter goes to where you want it to go to, and 75% goes off to administration. But that's not true with Ducks Unlimited. Because of what they stand for and how productive they've been, this is something that I've really enjoyed doing. And when they asked to start a chapter in Iowa City back in the 70s, I helped start that chapter and built that chapter into a fairly sizable chapter, and then I started another aspect of Ducks Unlimited, which was called a sponsors dinner. And these are people who give $200 a year, and we had a special event for them. And then there's another category. They have different categories of giving, and now there's a major sponsor program, which is $10,000 or more that people give. And most of the major donors are giving to specific projects, such as at one time we wanted to start a wetland around Iowa City. And we almost had it put together, except somebody decided to speculate on the land for housing, and all the people that were going to sell to us figured they could get more money if they sold it to housing development than to help restore a wetland. But we would have had a nice 400-acre wetland just outside of Iowa City because we had all the money raised. It wouldn't have cost. And the other beautiful thing about that is that it would have offered a tertiary sewage treatment facility for Iowa City, which would have saved the taxpayers millions of dollars. Because they passed new water regulations in which you have to treat primarily and secondarily, and then you have to filter it through something. And a wetland is a beautiful filter. You put in nitrates in the beginning. As it comes out of the wetland, the nitrates are all removed. You've got good pure water, and the nitrates help the marsh grow. So it was just a wonderful deal, but
what a disappointment
it really
for your
was.
group.
It really was, because we had a lot of money raised, and we were working with some Iowa City government people, but there was one landowner, and he was able to turn the other landowners around. So we really couldn't purchase the land because we could only buy it for appraised value, which was unfortunate. But that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah. What about the Songbird Project? Is that part of?
Well, that's something, I was very interested in artwork. I love art. I'm mainly an outdoor artist, either landscape scenes or wildlife. And so when we started the Ducks Unlimited program here in Iowa City, I used to go find local artists and have them do an original piece, and then I would take that original piece and have it reproduced. And then I would give some of those prints, signed and numbered, to the various donors. Well, we never really had anything for this dinner that was a husband-wife dinner as a favor for the women. So I started a Songbird series, and we're in our 16th year of that now.
And who are the artists for that?
Oh,
different artists are doing
different
this.
artists. Every year we have a different artist. We've had John Bald, Jim Spring, I'm trying to think, the Carters from Waterloo, Dan Hatata from Waverly, mainly Iowa artists. We went up and got Wanda Mumm, who's a noted songbird printer from Minnesota, and we've had one author from Wisconsin, but all the rest have been throughout Iowa. And so what we do is we take an original songbird and then have it printed and give it to every one of the wives who come to sponsors events with their husbands.
Well, how nice.
It's been a fun series.
My other area that I wanted to ask about, which I really was intrigued with, that you, in conjunction with the Lions Club, had started a visual screening project for children in the state.
Right.
When did that start, and how is it going?
Well, we started it, probably the idea came along about 4 years ago. We got organized, and this was something that obviously on the vision side I was very interested in, and then the ear, nose, and throat people wanted to throw hearing screening into this as well. Well, that's a problem because all hearing screening has to be done by audiologists, and we didn't have any audiologists for volunteers. The Lions can do, and through their volunteer organization, can do all the vision part. So we put the hearing and the vision together, and we called it Coming to Your Senses, so to speak.
Oh, very cool.
It was a very tricky title, and I love the title, but
I
the
do too.
hearing part has been more difficult. And the area educational agencies of Iowa are doing a fine job in screening hearing, but they're not doing a good job with the kids. So we did a bunch of research on a new device, which is a camera. And we got a prototype, and we actually really tested how good a machine it was for screening for vision problems in young children, 6 months to 4 years. And we went out and did 1,000 normal kids as a research project, and that took a year or so to do that, and really found out this device was quite good in screening for potential vision problems in children. So once that was proven, we had a device, and so we sat down with the Lions, who were looking for a project to do in Iowa, and they've always been strong supporters of sight and hearing in children, and decided to start a vision screening program. A model had been set up in Tennessee, in which they'd done it, but Tennessee luckily had raised $4.5 million to do this, and we didn't have that type of support. We got a grant from the International Lions, and we are up and running now. We've screened about 5,000 kids so far, but our target population's 186,000. So
You have a ways to go.
Oh, we got a long ways to go. Plus, we need funding.
Sure.
What I hope to be able to do is get the infrastructure built, and then let the state run it and support it. I mean, the Lions will do the screening, but the state can pay for a coordinator and put in some funding for each kid that's screened, because In this country, there's a big movement to have all children either examined or screened for vision problems prior to entering school. Now, we're promoting vision screening because it's much more cost effective. Because if we put in eye examinations for all kids, it's going to be very, very expensive. And we really don't have those healthcare dollars to do a whole bunch of normals. But the screening is so good, I feel, that we'll pick off the normals and not have to examine them and examine the abnormals.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, good luck on that.
So we're working
you're
on
optimistic.
that. We've got a ways to go, yes.
You're retiring this July, but it doesn't sound like you're going to retire.
No, I call this a career change.
Yeah, you're doing a career change. You're going to be working on that. I know, and I found out that you love to garden.
Yes, anything outdoors.
Anything outdoors.
Yeah.
And Bill, I also found out that you grow cucumbers and you make pickles.
Yes, I do.
Well, what kind? Dill or sweet?
Sweet. I've got a
Sweet
wonderful
pickles.
old family. It's not my family.
Is it bread and butter pickle? Like bread and
Well,
butter?
they're crispy sweet pickles. If you like a crispy sweet pickle, I'll bring you some.
I would love a
Good.
crispy. Well,
I'll have a jar for you.
all right. We're on for that. Well,
Okay.
so let's talk about retirement. I know you've got so many interests that I don't see you sitting in a rocking chair looking at the sunset. You'll be involved in a lot of things, correct?
Well, I hope so. I hope, it's like other people tell me they have less time after they retire than when they've been working. But I'm looking forward to having time to do more things like working with coming to your senses. And I'm going to miss medicine. I'm sure I am, because I've done it for almost 31 years now. And there's an awful lot of satisfaction in taking care of people and having that interaction with them. And I'm going to miss that, but I hopefully will transfer that into other types of things.
Well, you have a wonderful story, and I will look forward to hearing what's next in this next chapter of your life.
Okay.
And thank you for being a guest on One of a Kind.
Thank you for having me.
My guest on One of a Kind has been the nationally renowned pediatric ophthalmologist, Dr. William Scott. In 2001, at the University of Iowa, a grateful family endowed a chair for education in pediatric ophthalmology in Bill's name. Bill values teaching, helping young patients, his family, and the great outdoors. His story includes being a husband, father, grandfather, educator, physician, researcher, enthusiastic hunter and fisherman, and gardener. Bill Scott is one of a kind.